Cadet Sarah Chen stumbled through the academy's chrome corridors, her regulation boots squeaking against the polished floor with each uncertain step. The other cadets moved with the fluid grace of their respective species, the Zephyrians floating inches above the ground, the crystalline Vorthak clicking in perfect rhythm, and the towering Kenari striding with military precision. Sarah looked like a lost child among giants. "Watch where you're going, human," sneered Cadet Vexstar, his forearms gesturing dismissively as Sarah nearly collided with him at the intersection. The purple-skinned Thraxian's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Perhaps your species should stick to maintenance duties rather than pretending to be warriors." Sarah mumbled an apology, her cheeks burning red as other cadets turned to watch. The academy buzzed with the constant hum of a dozen different languages being translated through neural implants, but the universal sound of mockery needed no translation. She quickened her pace toward the dormitory sector, where she could hide until tomorrow's combat simulations. The Galactic Defense Academy stood as a monument to interstellar cooperation, its spires reaching toward the twin suns of Nexus Prime. For 3 centuries, the greatest warriors from 47 species had trained within its walls, preparing to defend the galaxy from threats both known and unknown. Humans had only been accepted into the Academy 15 years ago, and their track record remained disappointing. In her small dormitory room, Sarah collapsed onto the regulation cot and stared at the holographic display showing tomorrow's schedule. Advanced combat tactics, starship maneuvering, weapons systems integration. Every class reminded her that she didn't belong here. Her test scores hovered just above failing, her physical performance ranked in the bottom percentile, and her social interactions could be generously described as catastrophic. The door chimed, and her roommate Carolyn entered with the silent grace of her feline Nexary heritage. The alien's silver fur rippled with bioluminescent patterns that indicated mild concern, though her yellow eyes remained carefully neutral. "The instructors were discussing the upcoming field exercises," Carolyn said, settling onto her own cot with liquid smoothness. "Cadets will be assigned call signs based on their demonstrated abilities and tactical preferences. Most are quite excited about the prospect." Sarah's stomach twisted. Call signs were a sacred tradition at the Academy, earned through combat performance and tactical innovation. The greatest legends of galactic warfare were known not by their birth names, but by the titles that captured their essence in battle. Stormrider, Crystal Fawn, Voidwalker, names that struck fear into enemies and inspired allies. "I suppose mine will be something like Stumbles a Lot or Friendly Fire," Sarah muttered, pulling her pillow over her face. Carolyn's ears twitched in what Sarah had learned was the Nexary equivalent of a gentle laugh. "Perhaps you underestimate yourself, Sarah Chen. The instructors see things we cannot always perceive." The next morning brought the dreaded combat simulations. Sarah suited up in the standard academy armor, the adaptive material adjusting to her human physiology, while other cadets donned equipment designed for their unique biologies. The simulation chamber could replicate any battlefield condition, from the methane swamps of Vorthak Prime to the zero-gravity asteroid fields of the Shattered Zone. Today's scenario: a hostile boarding action aboard a disabled cruiser. 20 cadets would work in teams to clear enemy forces and secure critical ship systems. Sarah found herself assigned to Team Delta, alongside Vexstar and 2 other non-humans who made no effort to hide their displeasure at the arrangement. "Stay behind us and try not to get in the way," Vexstar commanded as they materialized in the simulation's starting corridor. The artificial ship groaned around them, emergency lighting casting eerie shadows while the distant sound of weapons fire echoed through the bulkheads. Sarah nodded mutely, checking her standard-issue plasma rifle for the 10th time. The weapon felt awkward in her grip, too heavy and unwieldy compared to the elegant energy weapons her teammates wielded with casual expertise. She followed them deeper into the ship, her breathing loud in her own ears despite the helmet's sound dampening. The first contact came at Junction 7. 3 holographic pirates armed with particle cannons opened fire from behind makeshift cover, their shots illuminating the corridor in brilliant blue flashes. Vexstar and his companions immediately spread into a textbook assault formation, returning fire with practiced precision. Sarah froze. The tactical manual she'd memorized dissolved into meaningless fragments as energy bolts whined past her head. One of her teammates shouted something urgent in the Thraxian language, but the translator couldn't process the rapid-fire military jargon. She saw Vexstar gesture angrily at her before turning back to the firefight. Without conscious thought, Sarah found herself moving. Not forward into the assault, not backward to safety, but sideways through a maintenance hatch she'd noticed earlier. The narrow passage led through the ship's service corridors, spaces too small for most Academy species but perfectly sized for a human. She crawled through ducts and utility tunnels while the battle raged in the main corridor, following instincts she didn't understand. She emerged behind the pirates' position just as Vexstar's team began their final assault. The holographic enemies were focused entirely on the frontal attack, their backs exposed to the maintenance area. Sarah raised her rifle, targeting systems highlighting 3 clear shots, but something made her hesitate. Instead of firing, she activated her suit's emergency beacon and began rapidly cycling through different frequency patterns, a technique she'd read about in an obscure technical manual. The pirates' equipment began malfunctioning, their weapons sputtering and their defensive shields flickering. Confused and partially blind, they became easy targets for Vexstar's advancing team. The simulation ended with Team Delta's victory, but Sarah's teammates seemed more puzzled than grateful. During the debriefing, Instructor Vaxion, a massive Canary with scars covering half his face, reviewed the tactical recordings with his usual stoic demeanor. "Cadet Chen," he rumbled, his translator rendering his voice in perfect galactic standard. "Explain your actions during the engagement." Sarah shifted uncomfortably under the gaze of her classmates. I saw the maintenance access and thought I could flank them. But when I got there, direct combat seemed unnecessary. The frequency disruption disabled their equipment more efficiently than a firefight would have. The instructor's compound eye studied her for a long moment. "You abandoned your assigned position and improvised a non-standard solution using techniques not covered in your tactical training." "Yes, sir." "I'm sorry, sir." "Do not apologize, Cadet. Your unconventional approach neutralized 3 enemies with 0 friendly casualties and minimal resource expenditure. However, your failure to communicate your intentions to your team created confusion and could have resulted in friendly fire." Sarah nodded, expecting the usual lecture about following orders and maintaining unit cohesion. Instead, Instructor Vaxion turned to address the entire class. "Combat is not a dance with predetermined steps," he announced. "The galaxy's greatest warriors adapt to circumstances that cannot be predicted or planned for." Today, Cadet Chen demonstrated that effectiveness matters more than orthodoxy. Vexstar's mandibles clicked in. What Sarah had learned was incredulity. "Sir, she violated basic tactical doctrine. Her actions were reckless and unpredictable." "Indeed," the instructor agreed. "Reckless and unpredictable. Keep that observation in mind for your own development, Cadet Vexstar." After class, Sarah found herself walking alone through the Academy's central plaza, where holographic displays showed the current war status across the galaxy. The Hegemony War had been raging for 7 years, with neither the Galactic Alliance nor the mysterious Hegemony forces able to gain decisive advantage. Casualty reports scrolled endlessly past, each number representing someone who would never return home. A shadow fell across her path, and Sarah looked up to see Cadet Commander Zarthal approaching. The Vortex crystalline form reflected the plaza's lights in complex patterns, and her diamond-hard features remained unreadable. As the top-ranked cadet in their class, Zarthal commanded respect from every species in the Academy. "Cadet Chen," she said, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones of her crystal-based anatomy. "Your performance today was interesting." Sarah straightened reflexively. "Thank you, Commander. That was not intended as praise. Your methods are chaotic and difficult to predict. In real combat, such unpredictability can be as dangerous to allies as enemies." "I understand, Commander. I'll work on improving my tactical communication." Zarthal's faceted eyes studied Sarah with the intensity of focused starlight. "You misunderstand my concern. I have reviewed recordings of your previous simulations. In each case, you have chosen solutions that no other cadet would consider. Your approach to problems is alien." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. In a galaxy where 47 species had found common ground in military doctrine and tactical theory, being called alien carried particular weight. "I don't try to be different," Sarah said quietly. "I just see things differently, I guess." That is precisely what concerns me. The Academy trains warriors to fight as a unified force, regardless of species. Your unconventional thinking disrupts that unity. Zarthal leaned closer, her crystalline features catching the light. I suggest you learn to conform more closely to established doctrine, for the good of your future teammates. With that warning delivered, the cadet commander strode away, leaving Sarah alone with her doubts. She spent the evening in the Academy's vast library, reviewing tactical manuals and combat histories, trying to understand why her instincts consistently led her away from textbook solutions. The next week brought a series of increasingly complex simulations. Sarah continued to find unconventional solutions, disabling enemy communications instead of destroying them, using environmental hazards to create tactical advantages, and employing misdirection rather than direct confrontation. Her success rate improved, but her isolation among the other cadets grew deeper. It was during the urban warfare simulation that everything changed. The scenario placed them in a contested city where enemy forces held strategic positions throughout the metropolitan area. Sarah's team was tasked with securing a communication hub in the city center, but intelligence indicated heavy enemy fortification. The standard approach would involve either a direct assault or a prolonged siege. Both options promised heavy casualties, but the mission parameters demanded speed. As her teammates debated attack vectors and resource allocation, Sarah found herself studying the city's infrastructure displays. What if we don't attack the communication hub at all, she said suddenly. Vextar's forearms gestured dismissively. The mission requires us to secure the facility, human. We cannot simply ignore our objectives. But we don't need to control the building to control its function, Sarah continued, her mind racing through possibilities. The communication hub relies on the city's power grid and data networks. If we took control of those systems. Her teammates stared at her with various expressions of confusion and disbelief. The idea of achieving a military objective without military action seemed to violate fundamental principles of warfare. You propose to wage war against infrastructure, asked Shandai, the team's Zephyrian tactical specialist. Her translucent form shimmered with patterns that indicated deep skepticism. I propose to win the mission with minimum casualties and maximum efficiency, Sarah replied. Give me 2 hours with the city's maintenance systems, and I can make their communication hub work for us instead of them. The simulation proceeded with Sarah's plan, despite her teammates' reservations. While they provided security, she infiltrated the city's computer networks through maintenance terminals and utility access points. Rather than destroying or capturing enemy assets, she subverted them, turning their own communication systems into monitoring devices and their defensive networks into surveillance tools. When the simulation ended, the enemy forces found themselves isolated and blind, their own infrastructure working against them. The communication hub remained fully operational, but now served Alliance interests instead of enemy objectives. Instructor Vaxion's post-mission analysis was unusually lengthy. Cadet Chen, your approach achieved all primary objectives while minimizing both friendly casualties and collateral damage. However, your methods fall outside standard tactical doctrine and would be difficult to replicate without extensive technical expertise. Yes, sir. I understand the limitations. Do you? Your solution required detailed knowledge of urban infrastructure, computer systems, and electronic warfare specializations that typically require years of dedicated study. Yet you improvised these techniques during combat simulation. Sarah felt the weight of 46 pairs of alien eyes studying her. I read a lot of technical manuals in my free time, sir. I find infrastructure interesting. The instructor's mandibles clicked in what Sarah was learning to recognize as profound thought. Indeed. Most interesting. Class dismissed. That night, Sarah sat in her dormitory room reviewing her performance recordings. The tactical analysis software highlighted her movements through the simulated city, showing a path that no other cadet had even considered. She watched herself navigate maintenance tunnels, access computer terminals, and manipulate city systems with an intuition that surprised even her. Kirillin entered quietly, her bioluminescent pattern showing the deep blue of contemplation. Sarah, may I ask you something personal? Of course. On Nexar, we have a concept called Zithkala, the ability to see paths that others cannot perceive. It is considered a form of intelligence, but also a burden. Those who possess it often struggle to relate to others who think in more conventional patterns.
Sarah looked up from her recordings. That sounds lonely. It can be. But it is also powerful.
The greatest hunters of our species have always been those who could see what prey would do before the prey knew itself.
Kira Lynn's ears twitched thoughtfully. I have been wondering if humans might possess a similar trait. I don't feel particularly gifted. Most of the time, I feel completely lost.
Perhaps that is because you are trying to follow paths created by others, rather than trusting your own instincts. Kira Lynn settled onto her cot, her silver fur rippling with gentle patterns.
Tomorrow, the instructors will announce Callsign assignments. Have you given thought to what yours might be? Sarah had tried not to think about it.
Callsigns were supposed to capture a cadet's essential nature as a warrior, and she couldn't imagine what her nature might be.
She wasn't fast like the Zephyrians, strong like the Canari, or tactically brilliant like the Vorthak. She was just different.
I honestly have no idea, she admitted.
Perhaps that uncertainty is itself revealing. The next morning brought the Callsign ceremony, a tradition dating back to the Academy's founding.
Cadets gathered in the Great Hall, where holographic banners displayed the names of legendary graduates. Stormrider, who had held the Kepler defense line for 18 days.
Crystal Fawn, whose tactical innovations had saved the outer colonies.
Voidwalker, who had disappeared into dark space and returned with intelligence that ended the synthetic war. Instructor Vaxion took the podium, his massive form commanding attention from every species present.
Today, you receive the names you will carry into battle.
These callsigns represent not what you have done, but what you have the potential to become. He began with the highest-ranking cadets. Zarthal became Diamond Edge, reflecting her crystalline heritage and sharp tactical mind.
Vextar earned the designation Iron Grip, honoring his multi-limbed advantage in combat.
Each name felt inevitable, a perfect match between cadet and identity.
Sarah's name came last, as befitted her position at the bottom of the class rankings.
She stood as Instructor Vaxion's compound eyes fixed on her, the hall falling silent with anticipation.
Cadet Sarah Chen, he announced, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. Your tactical approach defies classification. Your methods cannot be predicted or replicated. In every simulation, you have found solutions that exist outside conventional thinking.
Sarah's heart hammered in her chest as she waited for the inevitable disappointment. Perhaps Chaos Seed or Wildcard, something that captured her unpredictability without implying competence. Therefore, the instructor continued, you will be known by a callsign that reflects the fundamental nature of your tactical philosophy.
Your designation is none.
Silence filled the great hall. Sarah felt her face burning with shame and confusion.
None wasn't even a proper callsign, it was barely a word at all.
She heard whispers starting among her classmates, some mocking, others puzzled. Sir, she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper.
I don't understand. Instructor Vaxion's scarred features showed what might have been approval. None of your solutions follow conventional patterns. None of your tactics can be predicted. None of your methods fit established doctrine.
And, perhaps most importantly, none of your enemies will know how to counter strategies they cannot anticipate. The instructor's words echoed through the hall as understanding began to dawn on some faces.
None wasn't an insult or a mistake, it was a recognition of something unprecedented.
A warrior who cannot be categorized, he continued, cannot be countered. Your callsign acknowledges that you fight according to rules that exist nowhere else in the galaxy. Sarah felt the weight of 46 stares, but now they carried curiosity instead of mockery. She had been named for her alienness, her inability to fit into established patterns. Instead of shame, she felt a strange sense of recognition. As the ceremony concluded and cadets began to disperse, Zarthal approached Sarah with her characteristic crystalline grace. None, she said, testing the word.
It is unusual. That seems to be my specialty, Sarah replied. Indeed.
I have been considering our previous conversation, and I believe I may have been incorrect about the value of conformity.
Zarthal's faceted features reflected the hall's lights in complex patterns. Perhaps the galaxy needs warriors who think differently. Thank you, Diamond Edge.
We shall see if gratitude is warranted.
The real tests begin now, none. Callsigns must be earned through action, not merely assigned through ceremony.
As Sarah left the Great Hall, she caught her reflection in one of the polished wall panels. She looked the same as always, awkward, uncertain, out of place among her alien classmates. But, somehow, the designation none felt right. It acknowledged what she was rather than demanding she become something else. The first field exercise was scheduled for the following week, and, for the first time since arriving at the academy, Sarah found herself looking forward to the challenge. She was none undefined, unpredictable, and, possibly more dangerous than anyone realized. In the depths of space, far from the Academy's bright spires, hegemony intelligence officers reviewed intercepted communications from Nexus Prime. The enemy's newest graduating class would soon join the war effort, bringing fresh tactics and innovative approaches to the ongoing conflict. But, buried in the routine reports was a single notation that caught the attention of the hegemony's Tactical Analysis Division, a human cadet designated none, whose methods defied classification and whose potential remained entirely unknown. They began planning countermeasures for every other callsign from the Academy's latest class.
For none, they could plan nothing at all.
6 months after receiving her callsign, None found herself aboard the Gas Determination, a battle cruiser patrolling the contested Zirian sector. The transition from Academy simulations to actual warfare had proven jarring for most graduates, but None adapted with the same unconventional approach that had defined her training. The ship's corridors hummed with activity as crew members from dozens of species worked together to maintain peak operational readiness. None walked among them like a ghost, barely acknowledged by the veteran officers who still questioned why command had assigned such an inexperienced human to their elite vessel.
Cadet None, report to strategic planning, came the announcement over the ship's communication system.
She made her way through the maze of corridors, still marveling at how different real military life felt compared to the Academy's structured environment. The strategic planning chamber buzzed with holographic displays showing the current tactical situation across 3 star systems. Commander Thaxera, a distinguished Vorthak with battle-scarred crystal formations, stood before a massive star chart dotted with red and blue indicators representing friendly and hostile forces. None, the commander acknowledged as she entered.
We've received intelligence regarding hegemony movements in the Kepler Nebula.
Their forces have established a supply depot on asteroid designation KN-447, protected by an experimental defensive grid that has proven resistant to conventional assault. The holographic display zoomed in on the target asteroid, revealing a complex network of energy barriers, automated defense platforms, and patrol ships. Previous Alliance attempts to neutralize the depot had resulted in heavy losses with minimal success. 3 previous assault forces have failed to breach their defenses, Commander Thaxera continued. Diamond Edge's tactical analysis suggests a coordinated multi-vector attack using overwhelming firepower, but such an operation would require resources we cannot spare. None studied the tactical display, noting the standard defensive patterns that had defeated previous attacks. The hegemony had positioned their assets according to established military doctrine, creating overlapping fields of fire and redundant defensive systems. It was a textbook fortress, designed to repel textbook assaults.
What do we know about the asteroid itself? None asked. Standard metallic composition, approximately 12 kilometers in diameter.
Natural rotation period of 14 hours.
No significant geological features.
The commander's crystalline features showed mild confusion at the question.
The terrain is irrelevant given the enemy's defensive improvements.
But the asteroid existed before the hegemony arrived.
What was it used for originally? Commander Thaxera consulted her records, her compound processor accessing archived geological surveys.
Historical data indicates it was surveyed for mining potential approximately 40 years ago.
The operation was deemed economically unfeasible due to unusual mineral distributions.
None felt that familiar tingle of recognition, the same sensation she'd experienced during Academy simulations when an unconventional solution began to emerge.
What kind of unusual distributions? High concentrations of ferromagnetic materials in asymmetrical patterns.
The mining consortium concluded that extraction would be prohibitively complex. The commander paused, her crystalline structure reflecting the holographic displays in complex patterns.
Why do you find this relevant to our tactical situation?
Because the hegemony built their defense grid without understanding what they were building on, Nunn replied, her mind racing through possibilities. They saw an asteroid and designed fortress protocols for an asteroid.
But what if we don't treat it as a fortress at all? The next 8 hours found Nunn buried in geological surveys, mining reports, and astrophysics databases.
The asteroid's mineral composition told a story that military tacticians had overlooked: concentrations of ferromagnetic materials arranged in natural formations that could be exploited under the right circumstances. She requested access to the ship's materials engineering laboratory, where she spent the night running calculations and simulations that had nothing to do with weapons or shields. Instead, she focused on resonance frequencies, magnetic field generation, and the physics of asteroid rotation.
The proposal she presented the following morning left the senior officers speechless. You want to use the ship's mining laser array to trigger a controlled magnetic field collapse?
Captain Vorani, the Kenari commanding officer, examined Nunn's calculations with obvious skepticism.
This is not a mining operation, Cadet.
We are not here to extract resources.
We're not extracting anything, sir.
We're destabilizing the asteroid's natural magnetic field to create a localized gravitational distortion.
The hegemony's defense platforms are anchored to assume stable orbital mechanics.
If we alter those mechanics,
their entire defensive grid becomes unstable, Commander Thexera finished, her processing capabilities rapidly analyzing Nunn's proposal. The platforms would lose positional integrity, creating gaps in their coverage zones.
Captain Vorani's four eyes studied the tactical projection with the intensity that had made him one of the Alliance's most respected commanders.
The risk assessment is troubling.
If your calculations are incorrect, we could trigger a cascade failure that destroys the asteroid entirely, along with any intelligence value the depot might contain.
But, if the calculations are correct, Nunn replied, we neutralize their defenses without firing a shot at their defensive grid. The hegemony will spend weeks trying to understand what happened.
The debate continued for several hours, with senior officers raising legitimate concerns about the unprecedented nature of Nunn's proposal. No military force had ever attempted to weaponize asteroid geology, and the potential for catastrophic miscalculation seemed enormous. It was Commander Thexera who ultimately shifted the discussion. The hegemony's defensive strategy relies on predictable assault patterns. Every previous attack has followed conventional tactical doctrine, and every attack has failed.
Perhaps unconventional problems require unconventional solutions. Captain Vorani made his decision with the swift certainty that defined Kenari leadership. We proceed with Cadet Nunn's plan.
However, the implementation will be carefully monitored, with abort protocols established at every stage. The gas determination approached the target asteroid under stealth conditions, using the nebula's natural interference to mask their presence from hegemony sensors. Nunn found herself on the bridge for the first time, surrounded by officers whose experience dwarfed her own but whose conventional thinking had proven insufficient for the current challenge. Initiating geological scan, reported Lieutenant Shendai from the sensor station. The Zephyrian's translucent form shimmered with concentration as data flowed through the ship's systems.
Mineral distributions match archived surveys.
Ferromagnetic concentrations detected at predicted coordinates. Nunn monitored the scan results, comparing them to her theoretical models. The asteroid's internal structure resembled a three-dimensional puzzle, with metallic formations arranged in patterns that suggested natural magnetic field generation. The hegemony had built their depot without realizing they were constructing it on top of a massive, dormant electromagnet. Target the mining laser array at coordinates 347.2 by 182.7, Nunn instructed, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were attempting.
Low power pulse initially, increasing intensity gradually to avoid triggering defensive responses.
The ship's mining lasers had been designed for asteroid processing, not combat operations. They lacked the focused destructive power of military weapons but could precisely target specific mineral formations with surgical accuracy. Under Nunn's direction, they began carefully heating selected ferromagnetic deposits deep within the asteroid's core.
Hegemony patrol vessels showing normal patterns, reported the tactical officer.
No indication they've detected our presence. Magnetic field fluctuations beginning to register, Lieutenant Shindai announced. The asteroid's natural magnetic field is responding to thermal stimulation. None watched the sensor readings with growing excitement and terror. Her calculations suggested that heating specific mineral formations would destabilize the asteroid's magnetic field, creating fluctuations that would propagate through the surrounding space.
If successful, the effect would disrupt the precise orbital mechanics that kept the hegemony's defense platforms in position.
Field distortions reaching cascade threshold, the sensor officer reported.
Platform positions beginning to drift.
On the tactical display, the hegemony's carefully arranged defensive grid began to shift.
Defense platforms designed to maintain specific orbital positions found themselves pulled off course by gravitational anomalies they couldn't identify or counter.
Gaps appeared in their coverage zones as automated systems struggled to compensate for conditions their programming had never anticipated.
Their communications traffic is spiking, the intelligence officer noted. Multiple requests for technical support and system diagnostics. They're confused but not yet alarmed.
Captain Vorani turned to Nunn with something approaching respect. Your plan appears to be working, Cadet.
How long before the effect becomes irreversible?
Another 40 minutes should destabilize their entire defensive perimeter, Nunn replied, monitoring the cascade progression. But, sir, I recommend we begin tactical approach immediately.
The window of opportunity will be limited.
The assault that followed bore little resemblance to traditional military doctrine. Rather than fighting through layered defenses, the gas determination simply flew through gaps that shouldn't have existed.
Hegemony forces found themselves unable to establish effective firing solutions as their platforms continued drifting out of position. The depot itself proved lightly defended once separated from its technological fortress.
Within 6 hours, Alliance forces had secured the facility and captured intact intelligence that would prove invaluable to the war effort.
Hegemony personnel, when interrogated, could offer no explanation for their defensive system's failure.
The return journey to Alliance space passed quietly, but Nunn sensed that something fundamental had changed in how the crew viewed her. Officers who had previously ignored her presence now watched her with cautious interest, as if trying to determine what other impossible solutions might emerge from her unconventional thinking. Commander Thexera approached Nunn in the ship's observation lounge, where she often retreated to process the day's events. The vast transparency showed the swirling colors of hyperspace, a visual reminder of distances too vast for human comprehension. The success at KN-447 has attracted attention at the highest levels, the commander said, settling into a chair designed to accommodate her crystalline anatomy.
Fleet Admiral Kethmar has requested a detailed analysis of your tactical methodology.
Nunn felt a familiar flutter of anxiety.
I'm not sure I have a methodology to analyze, sir. I just look for patterns that others might miss. That ability appears to be more significant than you realize. Intelligence reports indicate that hegemony forces are struggling to develop countermeasures for tactics they cannot categorize. Commander Thexera's faceted features caught the hyperspace glow in complex refractions.
They have created defensive protocols for every known alliance strategy except yours.
Because mine aren't really strategies in the traditional sense. They're more like exploiting oversights. Perhaps that distinction is more important than you understand.
Traditional warfare assumes that opponents will behave according to established patterns. When one side refuses to follow those patterns, the other side's preparations become useless, Nunn finished. But that only works as long as I can keep finding new patterns to exploit.
Eventually, they'll adapt. Will they?
Your approach at KN-447 required geological expertise, engineering knowledge, and tactical innovation applied simultaneously.
How many military officers possess such diverse capabilities?
Nunn had never considered that her broad interests might constitute a strategic advantage. At the Academy, her tendency to read technical manuals and engineering documents had been viewed as yet another sign of her failure to focus on proper military subjects.
Most officers specialize in specific areas, she admitted. I just find everything interesting.
That intellectual curiosity may be humanity's greatest contribution to the Alliance war effort, Commander Thexera observed. Other species tend toward specialized excellence.
Humans seem inclined toward generalized competence.
The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the bridge. Captain Vorani's voice carried the crisp authority of immediate crisis.
All senior officers to the bridge.
Priority alert from Fleet Command. The bridge hummed with activity as the crew processed incoming intelligence reports. The main display showed a star chart of the hegemony's core systems, with new tactical markers appearing in real time. Fleet Command has detected massive hegemony fleet movements, Captain Vorani announced. Intelligence suggests they're preparing a major offensive operation, potentially targeting Alliance supply lines in the Meridian sector. Lieutenant Shindai highlighted specific areas on the tactical display. Preliminary analysis indicates coordinated attacks on 17 logistics hubs simultaneously.
If successful, they could disrupt Alliance operations across the entire front. Standard defensive doctrine calls for dispersed coverage of all potential targets, Commander Thexera noted.
However, our available forces are insufficient to provide adequate protection for 17 separate facilities. None studied the pattern of targeted locations, noting the mathematical precision of the hegemony's selection. They had chosen targets that would maximize disruption while minimizing their own resource commitment, a textbook example of strategic efficiency. But something about the pattern bothered her. The targeted facilities appeared random at first glance, but closer examination revealed subtle connections that suggested deeper planning. The hegemony wasn't just attacking supply hubs, they were attacking specific types of supply hubs.
Captain, Nunn said suddenly, what if they're not trying to disrupt our supply lines at all?
The bridge fell silent as senior officers turned to stare at her.
Captain Vorani's four eyes focused with laser intensity. Explain your reasoning, Cadet. Look at the facility types they've selected.
3 quantum communication arrays, 2 antimatter refineries, 4 heavy fabrication centers, 8 planetary defense coordinators.
That's not a random selection of supply targets.
None manipulated the tactical display, highlighting connections between the targeted facilities that others had overlooked. They're targeting facilities that support specific Alliance technologies we've been using to counter their new defensive systems.
Commander Thexera's crystalline structure flickered as she processed the implications.
If they eliminate our counter-technology production capabilities, their experimental defensive systems become invulnerable again, Captain Vorani finished grimly.
This isn't about supply disruption. This is about technological warfare. The realization shifted the entire strategic picture. Rather than dispersing forces to protect 17 targets, the Alliance needed to prevent the hegemony from achieving their technological objective. But conventional defensive deployment would still leave most facilities vulnerable.
We need a solution that protects all targets without dividing our forces, the captain said, his tone carrying the weight of impossible expectations.
None stared at the tactical display, watching the pattern of hegemony fleet movements with growing understanding.
They were attacking simultaneously precisely because they expected the Alliance to respond with conventional defensive dispersal.
The entire plan relied on Alliance forces behaving predictably.
What if we don't defend any of the targets, she said quietly. Every officer on the bridge turned to stare at her with expressions ranging from shock to outrage.
Captain Vorani's voice carried dangerous calm. Cadet, please clarify that statement immediately. The hegemony's plan assumes we'll try to protect our facilities. But what if we let them attack empty targets while we strike their staging areas?
None began manipulating the display to show hegemony fleet positions.
Their forces are concentrated for this operation, leaving their own infrastructure temporarily vulnerable. You propose to abandon 17 critical facilities to launch a counteroffensive? Commander Thexera's crystalline features showed the rapid calculations her species was famous for. The resource loss would be catastrophic. Only if we can't replace what we lose, None replied. But what if we capture equivalent facilities from the hegemony while they're attacking our decoy locations? The audacity of the proposal left the bridge in stunned silence.
None was suggesting that the Alliance abandon conventional defensive strategy entirely, gambling everything on a counterattack that could either end the war or lose it completely. Captain Vorani stood silent for long minutes, his compound mind processing strategic implications that spanned the entire galactic conflict. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of history. Cadet Nunn, you are proposing that we sacrifice the pawns to capture the king.
Yes, sir. Exactly that. And, if your assessment of hegemony capabilities is incorrect? If they can both execute their offensive and defend their territory?
Nunn met the captain's four-eyed gaze without flinching. Then, we lose the war quickly instead of slowly.
But, if I'm right, we could end it. The silence that followed seemed to stretch across light years. Finally, Captain Vorani activated the ship's long-range communication array. Priority signal to Fleet Admiral Kethmar. We have a tactical proposal that requires immediate command authorization.
As the message streaked across space toward Alliance headquarters, Nunn realized that her unconventional thinking had evolved from Academy curiosity to strategic necessity. The galaxy was about to discover whether human unpredictability could end a war that conventional thinking had prolonged for 7 years. In the depths of hegemony space, their military planners continued refining their assault on Alliance supply facilities, confident that their enemy would respond with predictable defensive measures. None of them considered the possibility that the Alliance might abandon defense entirely in favor of an unprecedented gamble. The stage was set for a confrontation that would either validate Nunn's unique perspective or demonstrate the fatal limitations of thinking beyond established patterns. Either way, the galaxy would never be quite the same. Fleet Admiral Kethmar stood before the assembled War Council, her Zephyrian form barely visible as she hovered above the central command table. The holographic displays surrounding her showed the largest military gamble in Alliance history unfolding across 17 star systems simultaneously. Operation Mirror Strike commences in 6 hours, she announced to the gathered representatives of 47 species. By tomorrow, we will either achieve decisive victory or face total strategic collapse. Nunn watched from her position at the tactical analysis station, still struggling to believe that her unconventional proposal had been approved at the highest levels of Alliance command. The plan she had sketched aboard the gas determination had evolved into a massive coordinated operation involving 3 full battle fleets and the voluntary abandonment of critical infrastructure. Commander Thexera approached her station, the vortex crystalline features reflecting the glow of tactical displays.
Second thoughts, Nunn?
Constant thoughts, Nunn replied, monitoring the real-time positioning of Alliance and hegemony forces.
But, not second thoughts. The pattern analysis still holds, they're committed to their offensive operation and can't recall forces without abandoning their technological objective.
The hegemony fleet movements continued according to Nunn's predictions. 17 separate battle groups approached Alliance supply facilities with overwhelming force, confident that their simultaneous attack would stretch Alliance defenses beyond breaking point. What they couldn't know was that Alliance forces had already evacuated the targeted facilities, leaving behind sophisticated holographic facades and automated systems designed to maintain the illusion of normal operation. Hegemony Vanguard forces have reached the outer perimeter of Target Alpha, reported Lieutenant Shindai from the communications array. Their assault formations appear normal for siege operations. Nunn studied the tactical feeds from Target Alpha, a quantum communication facility that had been completely evacuated 8 hours earlier. The hegemony forces would find functional equipment and believable defensive positions, but no actual personnel or critical components. It would take them several hours to realize they were attacking an elaborate deception. Alliance Strike Force Meridian has reached hegemony staging point Delta 7, came another report. Enemy defensive positions appear lighter than anticipated. That was the crucial test of Nunn's strategic analysis. She had gambled that the hegemony's commitment to their offensive operation would force them to strip defenses from their own territory. If she was wrong, Alliance forces would find themselves attacking prepared fortifications with insufficient firepower. Strike Force Meridian reports successful penetration of outer defensive perimeter, Lieutenant Shindai announced. Enemy resistance minimal. Proceeding to primary objectives. Fleet Admiral Kethmar turned toward Nunn's station, her translucent features showing the complex patterns that indicated high-stress calculation. Your analysis appears accurate thus far, Nunn. The hegemony has indeed weakened their defensive positions to support offensive operations. The critical moment comes when they realize what's happening, Nunn replied. Their command structure will need to decide between continuing the offensive or recalling forces to defend their own territory. Based on their previous tactical patterns, they'll probably try to do both.
And, if they recall their offensive forces? Then, we withdraw from their territory and defend our real facilities with minimal losses. Either way, we disrupt their technological warfare strategy. The next 6 hours unfolded with clockwork precision.
Hegemony forces systematically attacked 17 Alliance facilities, finding minimal resistance and achieving rapid tactical victories. Their commanders reported successful facility captures, apparently unaware that they had conquered empty buildings and holographic projections. Meanwhile, Alliance strike forces penetrated deeper into hegemony territory, encountering defensive resistance that proved insufficient to halt their advance.
None watched the tactical displays with growing amazement as her theoretical analysis translated into battlefield reality. Hegemony Command has detected Alliance forces in their core systems, Intelligence Officer Varnuz reported.
Communication traffic indicates emergency strategic conferences at highest levels.
This was the moment none had anticipated, the point where hegemony leadership would realize they faced an unprecedented strategic dilemma.
Their offensive forces were committed to holding captured facilities that contained no actual value, while their territory was being systematically devastated by Alliance forces they couldn't immediately recall.
Admiral, Nunn said suddenly, I recommend we accelerate the timeline for Phase 2.
Their command structure is about to recognize the deception, and their response time will be faster than our original calculations suggested.
Fleet Admiral Kethmar's form shimmered with the rapid neural activity that characterized Zephyrian decision-making under pressure.
All strike forces, implement immediate Phase 2 objectives.
Repeat, immediate Phase 2 implementation.
Phase 2 had been the most controversial aspect of Nunn's proposal. Rather than simply raiding hegemony facilities, Alliance forces would attempt to capture and hold key technological assets that could be used to end the war entirely. The risk was enormous, but so was the potential reward.
Strike Force Arcturus reports successful capture of hegemony research facility Omega Prime, came the update. Minimal resistance encountered. Facility appears to contain advanced defensive technology prototypes. Strike Force Vega has secured antimatter production complex Beta 7. Enemy technical personnel captured with equipment intact.
Strike Force Polaris engaging heavier resistance at Quantum Communication Hub Gamma 3, but initial objectives achieved. Nunn monitored the incoming reports with growing excitement and terror. The plan was working better than anyone had dared hope, but she knew the hegemony's response would be swift and devastating once they understood what was happening. Admiral, Intelligence Officer Varnuz announced urgently, massive hegemony fleet movement detected. All 17 offensive forces receiving recall orders. Estimated response time to defend their core systems, 18 hours.
18 hours, Fleet Admiral Kethmar repeated. Nunn, does that timeline allow completion of our objectives?
Nunn studied the tactical projections, calculating extraction routes and defensive possibilities with the same intuitive pattern recognition that had guided her throughout the operation.
If we focus on the 3 most valuable targets and abandon the rest, yes. But we'll need to begin immediate withdrawal from secondary objectives.
All strike forces, implement priority target protocol. Maintain positions at Omega Prime, Beta 7, and Gamma 3.
All other forces begin immediate extraction. The next 12 hours became a desperate race between Alliance extraction efforts and hegemony recall operations.
Nunn found herself effectively commanding tactical coordination for the largest military operation in Alliance history, her unconventional thinking proving essential as circumstances changed too rapidly for conventional planning.
Strike Force Arcturus requests technical support, came an urgent communication. Hegemony Research Facility contains experimental technology that doesn't match our intelligence reports.
Nunn accessed the tactical feeds from Omega Prime, studying images of equipment that her academy training had never covered. The technology appeared to be some form of adaptive shielding system, but its configuration suggested capabilities far beyond anything in Alliance databases.
Can you capture the research data? She asked. Negative. Storage systems require hegemony authorization codes we don't possess.
Nunn stared at the images, her mind racing through possibilities that had nothing to do with military doctrine.
The equipment showed signs of modular construction, with components that appeared designed for field modification rather than factory configuration.
Don't try to access their storage systems, she said suddenly.
The technology itself is the data. Those systems are designed to be reverse engineered.
Capture the physical equipment and let our technical teams analyze the construction principles.
It was another unconventional solution that bypassed established procedures in favor of practical effectiveness.
Rather than trying to crack hegemony security protocols, Alliance forces simply dismantled entire research installations and prepared them for transport.
But what if we don't defend the facility at all? None, Commander Thexera interjected, we cannot abandon our captured assets. We don't abandon them. We relocate them.
None manipulated the tactical display to show shipping routes and asteroid mining operations in the surrounding system.
Beta 7 is an antimatter production facility.
The critical components are the containment systems and manufacturing equipment, not the installation itself. Understanding dawned across the command center as officers realized what None was proposing. Rather than defending captured facilities, Alliance forces could dismantle and transport the most valuable components, leaving empty buildings for the hegemony to recapture.
Estimated time for critical component extraction? Fleet Admiral Kethmar asked. 8 hours with full technical teams, None replied.
But we can complete the process in parallel across all 3 facilities if we abandon everything except the core technologies.
All strike forces, implement emergency extraction protocol.
Priority salvage of critical technology components only.
Abandon all secondary assets. The final phase of Operation Mirror Strike became a technological treasure hunt conducted under enemy fire.
Alliance forces raced to identify and extract the most valuable hegemony technologies while enemy fleets closed in from all directions. None found herself coordinating salvage operations that had no precedent in military history.
Omega Prime extraction 70% complete. Hegemony forces engaging outer defenses. Beta 7 critical components secured. Initiating facility withdrawal. Gamma 3 encountering heavy resistance. Request permission to abandon position.
None studied the tactical situation at Gamma 3, noting that the facility contained quantum communication technology that could prove decisive in future operations. But the approaching hegemony forces represented nearly half their recalled fleet strength. Extract what you can in the next 30 minutes, then withdraw, she ordered. The technology isn't worth losing an entire strike force. As Alliance forces began their strategic withdrawal, carrying captured hegemony technology that would take years to fully analyze, None realized that the operation had succeeded beyond her most optimistic projections. They had disrupted the hegemony's technological warfare strategy while capturing assets that could shift the balance of the entire conflict. But, more importantly, they had demonstrated that unconventional thinking could achieve results that conventional strategy deemed impossible. Final casualty reports, Admiral, Commander Thexera announced as the last Alliance forces reached safe positions. Total losses, 4 destroyed vessels, 17 damaged, 43 personnel casualties. Enemy losses, estimated 37 vessels destroyed, multiple facilities compromised, unknown personnel casualties. Fleet Admiral Kethmar turned to None with an expression that would have been impossible to imagine when she first arrived at the Academy. Congratulations, None. Your strategic innovation has achieved the most decisive Alliance victory of the war. None felt the weight of galactic attention focusing on her, but also a strange sense of anticlimax. The operation had succeeded, but it had succeeded because she had thought differently rather than because she had thought better. The real question was whether such success could be replicated or whether it represented a unique convergence of circumstances. Admiral, she said quietly, I think we need to prepare for the hegemony to start thinking differently too. This operation will force them to reconsider their own tactical assumptions. You believe they will attempt to counter your unconventional approach? I believe they'll try to become unpredictable themselves. The advantage of being the only one who thinks outside established patterns only lasts until everyone else starts doing it too. The intelligence reports that arrived over the following weeks confirmed None's prediction. Hegemony forces began implementing tactical innovations that defied their previous patterns, apparently attempting to match Alliance unpredictability with their own strategic flexibility. But something unexpected happened as the war evolved beyond conventional thinking. Rather than escalating into greater chaos, the conflict began to stabilize around new principles that emphasized adaptability and innovation rather than overwhelming force. Nunn found herself assigned to a new alliance initiative called the Strategic Innovation Division, tasked with developing tactics that could counter enemy unpredictability while maintaining the flexibility that had proven so effective. It was a role that seemed tailor-made for someone whose callsign acknowledged that she fit no existing categories. "The war is changing," she reported to the War Council 6 months later. "Both sides are now operating outside conventional doctrine, which means the conflict has become a competition between different types of innovation rather than different types of military force." Fleet Admiral Kethmar studied the latest tactical analyses with the patient attention that had made her one of the Alliance's most effective leaders.
"And your assessment of our advantages in such a competition?" Nunn considered the question carefully.
The Alliance had 47 species contributing their unique perspectives to tactical development, while the hegemony appeared to be a more homogeneous civilization with fewer diverse viewpoints available. "I think we have more ways of being unpredictable," she said finally. "Human unconventional thinking, Vortak computational analysis, Nexari intuitive hunting, Zephyrian rapid adaptation, Kenari strategic patience, we can approach problems from more different angles than they can. Assuming we can coordinate such diverse approaches effectively."
"That's the real challenge," Nunn agreed. "My unconventional solutions only work because other people with conventional expertise can implement them.
We need to find ways to combine different types of thinking rather than replacing conventional thinking with unconventional thinking." The Strategic Innovation Division became a testing ground for that philosophy, bringing together officers from multiple species to develop tactical solutions that no single perspective could achieve alone. Nunn found herself working with former Academy classmates who had once viewed her as hopelessly awkward but now recognized the value of her different approach. Diamond Edge arrived as part of the division's computational analysis team, her crystalline processing capabilities essential for evaluating the mathematical implications of unconventional strategies.
Iron Grip joined the implementation specialists, his multi-limbed coordination perfect for executing complex maneuvers that single-species crews couldn't manage.
"It is strange to think that your callsign was initially seen as a criticism," Diamond Edge observed during one of their tactical planning sessions. "Now it appears to be the most accurate designation any cadet has ever received."
"Maybe that's the point," Nunn replied. "Callsigns aren't supposed to describe what we are. They're supposed to describe what we become." "And what have you become?"
Nunn considered the question as she watched their diverse team working together to solve problems that had seemed impossible just months earlier. She was no longer the awkward Academy cadet who couldn't fit into established patterns, but she wasn't exactly a conventional military officer either. "I think I've become someone who helps other people be more than they thought they could be," she said finally. "By refusing to fit into existing categories, I created space for everyone else to expand beyond their own limitations." The war continued, but its nature had fundamentally changed. Both sides now fought with strategies that evolved constantly, requiring adaptation and innovation rather than superior firepower or larger fleets.
Battles became exercises in creative problem-solving rather than applications of overwhelming force.
Nunn's role evolved from tactical innovator to strategic coordinator, helping diverse alliance perspectives combine into solutions that exceeded what any single approach could achieve. Her callsign remained accurate, she still fit no conventional categories, but it had become a source of strength rather than isolation. Years later, when military historians studied the conflict that became known as the Innovation War, they would identify Operation Mirror Strike as the turning point where conventional warfare gave way to something entirely new. The battle had been won not through superior force or better equipment, but through the willingness to abandon established thinking in favor of possibilities that existed outside traditional frameworks. Nunn's Academy instructors had been right about one thing: she truly was different from every other cadet they had trained. But they had been wrong about whether the difference represented a weakness or a strength. In a galaxy where conventional thinking had produced 7 years of stalemate, unconventional thinking had achieved decisive victory in a matter of weeks. The Academy updated its training programs to include courses on tactical innovation and strategic creativity, though none of the graduates would ever quite match the unique combination of curiosity, adaptability, and unconventional insight that had made Nunn's approach so effective. Her callsign entered military legend alongside Stormrider, Crystal Fawn, and Voidwalker, but with a crucial difference.
Those legendary warriors had excelled within existing frameworks of military thinking.
None had created entirely new frameworks that expanded the possibilities available to everyone who came after her. In the end, the Academy had been right to label her awkward. But they had failed to recognize that awkwardness, properly channeled, could become the greatest tactical advantage the Alliance had ever possessed. None had proven that fitting no categories could be more powerful than fitting all of them perfectly.
The galaxy was vast and full of challenges that no single species could solve alone.
But, with warriors willing to think beyond established limitations, combining their unique perspectives in ways that created new possibilities, perhaps even the impossible might become achievable.
None had shown them how to begin. The rest was up to the galaxy itself.